Welcome to today's edition of the Statler Financial Radio Show. Your financial security is our business. Have a question for the team? Call today, 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
Thanks for joining us today on the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Philip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We've got a great show lined up for you today, talking about the 4 retirement pillars. Pillars are a classic feature of architecture, and we can all think of 1 or 2 well-known structures lined with those solid columns out front. Now, think about what would happen if you knocked one of those out. The whole thing might come down, right? But it can be the same for your retirement. So we'll get to that in a minute. Thanks for joining us today on the Statler Financial Radio Show. Philip, how are you feeling today? I'm super excited to dive into today's topic.
Hey, I am too, Danielle. And as a matter of fact, I like the idea that we're talking about architecture because my wife and I are planning a trip to Italy, and we are working hard on what places we want to visit. And one of them is obviously the Colosseum, which I think has a lot of columns. And so that could be kind of interesting to put it all together.
I know. I'm really interested on your trip, so we would love to hear how that goes and also see how that aligns with what we're talking about. So let's jump right in. Let's go with the basics, right? So what are the 4 pillars of all retirement income plans?
So I think when we look at those pillars, typically in the old houses, there was usually 4 pillars, and we have 4 pillars when it comes to our income planning. And it starts like this. We need to look at protection, because protection is where folks can put money and not expect it to go up and not down. They're protecting it on the downside. Then there's the growth potential. We need to have the potential to help keep up with inflation. And so it's got to have some growth potential. That's got to be a leg or a column there. Income is important, seeing how we're doing an income plan. So income has to be a column within that. And then liquidity. Sometimes folks don't really understand what liquidity means. It comes in 2 forms, right? We have just pure savings as liquidity that we can get to it. But also we have other investments that are, quote, liquid, because you can access them at any time. And so liquidity is important because when we build the income plan, we need income, right? And that requires liquidity coming out of our accounts. So that's kind of the 4 pillars that we look at when it comes to retirement income planning.
Philip, I appreciate you breaking each of those down. And just like with everything, there's always risk, right? And so what kind of risk are you exposing yourself to by not having a 4-pillar retirement plan?
Well, I think one of the things is if we are, if we look at those 4 pillars, and let's just say we knock one out. What if we knocked out the protection pillar? We didn't worry about protection. Well, and the stock market takes that big dive right before you want to retire. That can be a crumbling of the roof of your whole plan. And so that's why it becomes important. Or you look at liquidity, right? If liquidity is one of my columns and all of a sudden I have no liquidity, all of my money is tied up and I need some cash flow, well, what's going to happen? Well, we don't have access to it. So all 4 of these pillars are vitally important when it comes to constructing that whole retirement income plan. And Danielle, that's exactly why I created the core retirement design, to help people put together that design of their retirement and where their income is going to come from, as well as what the risk looks like and tax planning and those type of things, all built into our core retirement design. It's simple. It's easy. It's 30-minute phone conversation with you and I to see where you are on the plan for retirement and to see if we can plug in and help. The best way is to give us a call at 863-877-1188 to schedule your core retirement analysis. It's simple, folks. It's a half-hour call with you and I together to determine if you are on the right path to the retirement you always dreamed of. It's a half hour, easy to do. We'll make sure that you're doing the things you need to be doing. And if not, we'll let you know and see how we may be able to help you fill in those gaps. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 877-1188.
We always like to remind you that you do not have to plan for your retirement alone, so do not hesitate to call Philip and his team at 863-877-1188. Again, 863-877-1188. Philip, we're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement, and you mentioned that the 4 pillars consist of protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. Now, these are all very diverse goals. You mentioned earlier you can't have one without the other. It kind of reminds me like baking. If you miss one ingredient, the whole thing is messed up, right? By the time you taste the cake, you're like, something's off here. So when it comes to the 4 pillars of retirement, how can one plan address all of them to ensure that we have each and every one of them in the plan?
Absolutely. Danielle, you talk about baking. I look at construction, right? And so when we look at construction and we look at the blueprint, there's a blueprint for the electrician. There's a part that goes to the plumber. There's a part that goes to the carpenter. But if you look at the whole house, you got one blueprint, but you got subsections that go out to different contractors. It's kind of the same thing when we start building that income plan. And again, it kind of circles back around our core retirement design as well, because one of the things is that we have to look at those specific, talks about columns. I use buckets in our planning process, but there's the same thing, right? We look at that column for liquidity. We look at that column for income, growth potential, and protection. And so each of those have their own characteristics and their own pros and cons. And so when we put them all together, Danielle, in that planning process, they all work together. They're all interconnected. Just like building the house, we got one blueprint that everybody's looking at, but then when the electrician needs his section, he can pull it out. Same section here. We've got one major plan. And if we need to tweak a section, a column, we can go into that column and tweak whether it's a growth potential or it's income or liquidity. We can go into that section, pull it out, and make the changes that we need to make to that column of our income planning. But it all has to work together to make sure that your income is going to last the rest of your life. That's the fun part, to put that plan together.
And Philip, you're right. I like the analogy of like the construction, like building a house, right? And so it kind of reminds me of like the foundation is the most significant piece. And so when we're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement, which one of the 4 pillars do you start with when it comes to building out a plan? Which one would you consider as like, this is the foundation of your overall retirement plan?
So I wouldn't necessarily call it the foundation, but where we start is I want to start with the risk. I want to know, your growth potential, and the growth potential bucket requires taking some risk. And so we have to measure what that risk should be for you specifically, because not everybody's risk tolerance is going to be the same. And so we want to find out what your risk number is, so that then when we start building that part or that column for potential growth, we know what the target is when we start looking at that. The other part of that is that risk is a big deal. So we also want to measure the risk that you are currently taking in your portfolio. A lot of times folks don't realize that they have more risk in their portfolio than they should have. There's a few people that don't have enough risk in their portfolio. So it can go both ways, and it's a process to determine what that is. But Danielle, that's really the starting point for us here at Statler Financial.
I appreciate that clarity. Everyone's different, and I appreciate going back to bringing that awareness of risk tolerance. How far are you into having risk? Are you not taking enough? That sounds kind of, weird for someone to say, do I need to take more risk? But this is why you and your team have built out this core retirement design. Philip, tell me a little bit more about why this is the perfect place to start.
Because when we look at it, again, I go back as far as 2000, right? 1999, 2000, because that was the first big bubble we had. And I remember distinctly that there were folks that were getting ready to retire, and literally their 401ks went down 50% over about a 12 to 18 month period of time. And they had to put off retirement because of that significant event. The same thing happened in 2008 when people had to put off retirement because of the volatility in the market and the market declining into that bear market. And so to me, the risk part of somebody's portfolio, that potential downward movement is important, that we have that under control and that it really and truly matches up with the amount of risk that you're willing to take because of that specific scenario, and because that could happen at any time. And when it does, it can impact your income. And so that's the reason that's where I start, because that can have the biggest potential downfall to your income plan.
And this is a stat, Philip, that we share constantly on the show about how there's nearly 70% of Americans who are missing a written financial plan. And people without a plan tend to feel less confident about their future. They have no roadmap or roadway of knowing which way to go. And it seems like without the pillars that we're talking about today, your retirement may seem a little wobbly. Does that sound correct?
Hey, that's a good analogy. I know a lot of folks out there are worried about, that they haven't saved enough, or that you won't even be able to retire when that time comes. I know most of you, based on that statistic, which I see every day in my office, you don't have a written retirement income plan. And that written retirement income plan can really, truly help you feel more financially stable, more retirement ready to pull the trigger and do that big thing, that retirement, because that is a big deal. And so I don't want you to be one of those folks that have to worry about your money all that time and whether or not you can afford to retire or not afford to retire. So that's why I developed this process, the Core Retirement Design, to help you design that retirement you always dreamed of. And it really covers 3 basic core principles. Unlike the 4 pillars, because that's part of one of the core projects we look at, we will look at risk, we want to look at taxes in retirement, and we want to look at income planning. All 3 of those areas are covered in our Core Retirement Design. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188. It's simple. It's you and I having a simple 30-minute phone conversation to determine if you are on the right path for the retirement you always dreamed of. If you are, great. I'll let you know that, hey, you've done everything right and you're in good shape. However, if there's an area that I feel like we can help you in, I'll let you know, hey, look, maybe you can tweak this, maybe you can tweak that. It's all part of our core retirement analysis. Again, give me a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
You don't want to miss out on this opportunity to talk with Philip and his team. Again, you don't have to plan for your retirement alone. Don't hesitate to call at 863-877-1188. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. We're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement and how the 4 pillars are needed for a sturdy retirement. Now that you know what they are, coming up next, we'll dive into why each pillar is so important for your retirement. You're listening to the Statler Financial Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Needing a second opinion on your retirement plan, or to see if you are paying more than your fair share to Uncle Sam? Schedule your complimentary visit today. Text VISIT to 270-201-7080. That's VISIT to 270-201-7080.
Do you actually read your financial statements, or do they get tossed in a drawer and forgotten about? You could be making an expensive mistake by not taking the time to look at them. If you're paying high fees in your retirement portfolio, it could be costing you tens of thousands of dollars or more over your lifetime. Imagine the difference an extra $100,000 could make in your retirement. Statler Financial Services can help you uncover any hidden fees in your retirement accounts. Call today to schedule a time to talk about your situation. 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. When you're close to retirement, every dollar matters. Would you like to know where your money is going? Find out what kind of fees you're really paying. Statler Financial Services can help. 863-285-3815. 3815. 863-285-3815. Advisory services offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida.
Time to retire right. This is the Statler Financial Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Philip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement. Earlier, we were talking about how the 4 pillars are needed for a sturdy retirement. They are protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. If you knock one of them out, it can possibly impact your retirement. So, Philip, let's continue this conversation. Let's first start with talking about the protection in your retirement plan. What are we protecting our money from?
So in this case, we're protecting our money from market losses. So we don't want to incur a market downturn. And so one column needs to be protection so that we protect the assets that we have from market losses and still have the ability to grow them to help with the income part of our income plan.
And as we're moving on to what can you do to help taxes from taking too much of a bite out of your savings? Taxes is another reminder that we need when it comes to being proactive. It's that thing that we can't avoid. So as we're talking about market losses and protection, what can we do to help taxes from taking too much of a bite out of our savings?
Well, I think the first thing we can do, Danielle, is don't forget that taxes are coming, right? That I think too many people, they retire and they forget that when I pull money out of my retirement accounts, I've got taxes to do with it. And so, we always say that you don't own your IRA or your 401k or 403b on your own. You got a partner. His name's Uncle Sam. And every time you take money out, he's got his hand out because he wants his share. And you never know what that share is until you file your tax return. Maybe it's only 10%, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 30%, right? So that's where I think having the income plan helps you kind of plan out, where's my money going to come from? What does that look like? And then the other part of that is trying to look at opportunities to take advantage of whatever lower tax brackets you are in today. So like I have clients that are in a 10% tax bracket. Well, we need to be taking money out of the IRA now and pay 10% instead of down the road and pay 22%, right? So it's having the knowledge to know what needs to be done when it comes to that tax part of the whole planning process. And that's, again, one of the 3 areas that we look at specifically in our core retirement design.
And Philip, as we're talking about taxes being one of the things that many people overlook, healthcare costs are another thing. It can deplete savings pretty fast, especially in the case of an emergency. And I'm sure you meet with clients all the time, reminding them that you have to be aware of this. So how do you help clients adequately prepare for healthcare costs in retirement?
That's a little harder to do, right? Because we know that healthcare costs are going to go up. We know that based on Fidelity study that they do every year, that the amount of spending that you're going to have for healthcare, meaning Medicare premiums, Medicare supplements, plus your copays. When we look at all of that, I think they've come up with a number over your lifetime of like $350,000, which is astronomical. But that's 30 years, basically, of you paying healthcare costs. And so I think one area and one way is that you have to build in inflation into your income plan to help offset those higher costs when it comes to medical.
And Philip, we briefly touched on this earlier about the market losses. And so I wanted to go back and ask you, should retirees still have a portion of their retirement assets invested in the market? Like, how do we protect our money from the downside of risk?
My answer is absolutely they should. Now, how much really depends. And so I have some folks that are they're just so anti-market that they're not in the market, but that is not what should be happening, right? So we should have money in the market no matter what. And the question becomes how much, right? And that depends on a lot of factors. One is, what does your risk tolerance say? What is your risk number? Secondly, how old are you? How long till retirement? How long in retirement can we expect your life expectancy to be? And then the other part of that is, what's your income look like? Right? Because if you have a lot of income sources coming in from pensions and Social Security and other stuff, then, well, the money in the stock market, you're not taking income off anyway, so it doesn't really matter from an income perspective. But I tell people, look, anywhere from 10% to 50%, if you are retired, could be in the market. The younger you are, the more exposure you can afford to have in the market. And we kind of start with the rule of 100 and then go from there. But all of that comes down to our core retirement design, Danielle, because that really focuses on that risk component of that whole planning process. How much risk should an individual have in their portfolio? And that is one of our key concepts in our core retirement design. And so we walk through that very specifically to determine what somebody's risk number is and what they currently have in their portfolio. Folks, if you don't know what your risk is, if you don't know what your risk score is on a scale of 1 to 100, you need to give us a call. 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188 to start your core retirement analysis.
Now, you do not have to hesitate to call Philip and his team. All you have to do is give him a call at 863-877-1188. There's no cost or obligation. All you have to do is call him and his team at 863-877-1188. Okay, Philip, we're working our way down to the next pillar. Let's now talk about the growth potential, because money will be essential in retirement, and there's the possibility that you'll need more of it. We all want more money, especially in retirement, but immediately it seems like your mind can go straight to investments. But is there a way to potentially grow your money without investing in the markets? Some people may not feel safe or confident, but this is why you and your team have been doing this for multiple years. You can walk us through this, but is there a way to potentially grow your money without investing?
So there is, Danielle, is a short answer. The long answer is, how do you do that, right? And so we look at that and say, okay, how can we grow our money? And here at Statler Financial, we use a tool called an index annuity. And that annuity allows you to have protection so that you can't lose your principal, but yet participate in the market growth, because we use the indexes to determine what our income will be, what we've earned for that year. And so that being the positive part, right, that we can't lose money, there are some downsides, right? There's always pros and cons to every one of the pillars we talk about. And so the pros, when we look at the annuity situation, is we can't lose principal in the index annuity. We've got the ability to make somewhat market returns. And we've got the ability to take some cash out every year when we need to. Now, we are limited to how much cash you can take out. We've got some terms in there. So sometimes it's a 5-year, 7-year, could be a 10-year annuity. So there are some contractual obligations there. So there are pros and cons when it comes to the annuities. But they are a tool that do allow us to protect our principal from market losses. And so it's specifically for that.
Philip, as we're moving on to the topic of inflation, many people are concerned about it, but which one do we need more of, protection or growth? Or can we have both?
Well, I was going to say, is that a trick question? So I think we need both. I haven't sat down in a situation where we did not need both of those things to be part of the planning process. Because the older we are, the more protection we need. The younger we are, the more potential we need for growth. And so, the older we get, there has to be this balancing act between the two. And I said earlier, one of the things that I use as a starting point, and that's not necessarily the ending point, But we start with a rough number of the rule of 100, which says basically we're going to take 100, we're going to subtract your age from it, and that the balance of that is what should be at risk in the markets. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. It's a starting point. And whether it's 10 or 15 points higher than that or 10, 15 points less than that, that depends on the risk score. Where do we come out when we measure what your risk number is? Because that is the end number to determine what that balance looks like in the planning process.
And you talked about there is potential of having both, right? So if we can go into, Philip, how do you find the right balance between growth potential and principal protection in your plan?
Well, that comes back to measuring what somebody's risk tolerance needs to be. And so we go through a questionnaire, some what if analysis to determine what somebody's risk number is. So we've got the tools to do that. And if their risk number is a 45, then we come back and build a portfolio based on potential growth and principal protection based on that number to get that portfolio somewhat close to what their risk number is. And so that process will get us really close to what that allocation of growth potential versus principal protection for their plan needs to be.
And Philip, I know you and your team have this core retirement design that helps many retirees get on track if they don't have a plan. Give us a brief overview of what this core retirement design can do for you.
So core retirement design really starts with the premise that, risk is vitally important when it comes to retirement. And so we want to measure what that risk is in your current portfolio and measure that against what the risk should be based on your risk tolerance. So that's number one. Number two is looking at taxes. We already know that in 2026, taxes are going to go up. They're going to go back to what they were prior to Trump's tax law changes. And so we need to be cognizant of that and take advantage of the lower tax brackets now. So we look at that as part of our planning process. What can we do? What tools can we institute? What plan can we put in place to take taxable money and move it from a higher tax bracket to a lower tax bracket? And then the last thing we look at in our core retirement design is we design that income plan to provide the income you need in retirement so that we've got that map to follow. And what buckets are we taking money out of, and when are we taking money out of there, and how long is that bucket going to last? That's part of the core retirement design. The best way is to give us a call at 863-877-1188 to schedule your 30-minute, no cost, no obligation phone consultation where we'll walk you through our process. We'll see where you are and where you want to be and see if you're on track for the retirement you always dreamed of. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
If you have any questions about retirement, don't hesitate to call Philip and the team at Statler Financial Services. They're here to guide you through a successful retirement. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. Again, 863-877-1188. Now, you need 4 pillars for a sturdy retirement. And coming up next, we'll get into the ways to make sure that your income pillar is solid and built to last. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It might ramp up or it could slow down, but inflation never goes away. Do you know how it could impact your retirement savings? Text VISIT to 863-877-1188. That's VISIT to 863-877-1188.
It's nice when you get everything on your list in one place, isn't it? Philip Statler at Statler Financial Services agrees. That's why he offers comprehensive retirement planning all under one roof. You shouldn't have to go one place for information about tax planning, another for estate planning, and another for retirement income planning. That's why Statler Financial Services was started. Philip wanted to build a company that could help families with all aspects of their retirement. Statler Financial is more than just convenient, they're knowledgeable and experienced. To set up a meeting with Philip Statler and his team to talk about your retirement plan, all of it, call 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. Statler Financial Services, one stop for a wealth of retirement solutions. 863-285-3815. Advisory services offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida.
I want to help you understand some things. Number one, timing of your RMD, because they could potentially push you into a higher tax bracket. Imagine how fast your savings could shrink if you rack up penalties along with taking regular withdrawals and paying taxes.
Time to retire right. This is the Statler Financial Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Philip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We're continuing the conversation about 4 pillars to a sturdy retirement. Now, the 4 pillars for sturdy retirement are protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. But first, you need that income. It's the basic pillar for which every other pillar is served to support. So, Philip, where do most people get their income for retirement?
Well, let's start with the basics, right? The first place that most people are going to get their income is going to be from Social Security. You know, it's something they've paid into for years and years. And when they get ready to retire, that's the trigger they're going to pull and start bringing in some Social Security. Now, your benefits going to depend upon a lot of things, and we'll talk about that a little later. But the other thing that we can have is some people have a pension. If you work for the school system or one of the county governments or state governments, and typically you'll have an actual pension that comes in too. So you get 2 legs of income, right? You get the pension and you get Social Security. Not a bad way to start retirement. And then the other way that we have to get retirement income is you have to create it yourself. And that's where income planning comes into play, because a lot of times your Social Security and your pension isn't enough, especially if you just get Social Security. Then, typically you had a 401k that you dump money into, and now we have to take that 401k or 403b and we have to put that thing to work to create the income you're going to need to help, fill in the gap when it comes to income planning. So to me, that's why income planning is so important, Danielle.
Philip, you're right. Majority of people do get their income from Social Security. So how can you help maximize your Social Security benefits? How can we ensure that those benefits last as long as we live?
Well, we know Social Security is going to last as long as we live, number one. So that's good. The second thing we know about Social Security is that if you take it early, you're going to get hit with a huge discount. And some people don't take that into consideration as much as they should. If you don't retire or if you start taking Social Security before your what they call full retirement age, then you take a haircut, and that can be as much as 30%, which is huge. You take your retirement Social Security at 62, you're taking a 30%, maybe even more haircut than what you would have gotten if you waited to 67. And I know there's reasons to do both. And then if you can wait till you're 70, then you actually earn about 32% more than what you would have earned otherwise. And so that's an area that I think that Social Security planning becomes really relevant. So many people think, well, I'm 62, I need to take my Social Security. Folks, that's not always the best choice. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it's not the best choice. And so part of our income planning process is to look at the different options folks have to pull out their Social Security and when to start it and when is the best time for somebody to take that Social Security benefit. And sometimes waiting a couple of years may make a huge difference in your potential income over your lifetime.
And Philip, let's give a scenario. Like, let's say if our Social Security or any pension income won't be enough to live on in retirement, can you talk about, are there any other options for creating lifetime income using a portion of our retirement savings?
So there are several different ways that folks can do that to help fill in the gaps there. And there's actually been a couple studies recently that have come out that show that if you will take a part of your retirement income and put it into what we call an immediate annuity, meaning that you're trading dollars for income for the rest of your life, and then you use the 4% rule on top of that, then you can actually increase your retirement income. That was actually a recent study that came out. So there are other ways to use annuities as well. The immediate annuity, once you pull that trigger, you don't have access to any of the money you put in there. All you're going to get is that monthly income coming out of there. So that can be good and that can be bad because number one, you can't outlive it. Number two, you can't get to it. So that may be okay for some folks. Some annuities actually have what they call an income benefit or an income rider, which will provide lifetime income over your lifetime, even if that account goes to zero. So there are things out there that you can use. Now, obviously, we've talked before about annuities. There are pros and cons, right? Even when we use the income rider, there are benefits and there are negative things. And so you have to balance those two things out. I will tell you this, there is not a single investment that doesn't have pros and cons. Even a bank account has pros and cons. So everything we do has those pros and cons. And so we have to weigh those things out to determine what portion should go and be allocated into these different tools to help you get to where you need to be. Give us a call at 863-877-1188 to walk through our core retirement analysis. It's simple. It's absolutely free. 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
There's no cost or obligation to talk with Philip and his team, so do not hesitate to call that number at 863-877-1188. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. Philip, we're continuing the conversation about the 4 pillars to your retirement. The 4th pillar, as we're coming to a close on the pillars, we've walked through each and every one of them. The last one is liquidity. Why is this so important for our retirement plan?
Well, imagine this, Danielle, is that you've got this money sitting over there, and you need some, but you can't get to it. You can't access it because the penalties are so high, or it's just locked up and it's illiquid. Well, what good is it if you can't have access to it? If it doesn't give you some cash flow, what good is it? And that's the way I look at liquidity. And so we need to have enough buckets of money that we can access what we're going to need from a cash flow standpoint and for emergencies to fund our retirement lifestyle. I mean, that's the whole reason that folks put away that money all those years, is so that when it comes time to retire, they can enjoy it. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with a client that we were looking at and saying, okay, they came in and said, look, we've got this money, but we haven't really taken anything. And we want to travel. We want to do some things. Hey, it's not a problem. We've got liquidity in there. We can take money out. And so we ran through a couple scenarios and said, okay, look, we can take $12,000, $15,000 a year out for your travel budget. And they were excited that they could go do that type of thing. And so liquidity has to be part of the plan. And you need to know what that liquidity is when it comes to the planning process.
Philip, I honestly love this conversation because, like you mentioned, the majority of us kind of think, I don't need any money in an emergency fund. I'm going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. But we always got to be just prepared for anything. And so how much would you say of our retirement savings should be liquid?
Well, let's distinguish between liquid and what should be in your emergency fund, because they're kind of two different things. Okay, because we can have a lot of liquidity,
right,
but not necessarily an emergency fund. So I instruct my clients that I want them to have somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 in an emergency fund. Basically, that before interest rates went up, we still would say put that money in there. We know it's not going to earn much, but it is there where you can get your hands on it today if you needed it. And so that's the key to the emergency fund, is that if I need it today, I can get it. And so we want to have that 20 to 50,000. I don't think anybody needs more than $50,000 in an emergency fund. And so, because we don't know, what could happen, right? We could have to take an emergency trip to one of our kids, had to buy tickets today, and they're astronomical if you had to buy airline tickets for tomorrow, right? So,
yes.
So maybe, you're going to have to spend $4,000 right there. And, it's not smart to keep a bunch of money in your checking account. So making nothing. So that's what the emergency fund is for. We can take it out. We got access to it today and take care of those things. And so that's where I think the emergency funds need to come. Now today, it's not so bad, right? Because you can stick it in a savings account, making 4.3, 4.5% just in a pure savings account. So people don't feel so bad today putting that money in that savings account. So that's my opinion, at least when it comes to emergency funds.
Philip, I appreciate that reminder. So $20,000 to $50,000 in your emergency fund is something that we need to keep in mind here as we're building out our plan to make sure we have that in our emergency fund. But just to recap everything, I know we walked through a lot of different scenarios, walked through each and every one of the pillars. But as we recap all of this, can you recap what those four pillars are and kind of how do you bring them all together and why they are so important?
Absolutely. So the four core pillars are protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. And basically, in the process, you have to really go through the whole planning process to put all those components together. No different than building a house. We've got to put those key things into the plan. And that's how we're going to create the income down the road. And that's why I developed the core retirement design, is to help people design, just like you design a house, we design your retirement. And so we look at the possibilities that are out there. Now, sometimes you have to pare those possibilities down, just when you build a house, right? Well, maybe I can't have that specific thing I want. And so, but planning gives you the opportunity to make those changes and to understand what needs to happen. If you want the Cadillac, right? If you want everything a certain way, well, maybe I have to work a couple more years. Maybe I have to do a few more things. And so that's where planning before you retire really comes of value to determine what you need to do to design that retirement you always dreamed of. Again, that's a core retirement design. For our part, we offer you 30 minutes of our time, no cost, no obligation. We'll see where you are in the process of your retirement planning. What pieces do you have in place? And then I'll look and say, okay, well, have you thought of this? Or have you thought of that? Or maybe these are things you need to do. But that's all part of our core retirement analysis. It's a 30-minute call. Give us a call right now to schedule your core retirement analysis. It's 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
You do not want to miss this opportunity to talk with Philip and his team. They've been doing this for years, so do not hesitate to call at 863-877-1188. Again, 863-877-1188. Coming up next, we're diving into our Statler Financial Radio Mailbag, where we answer some of your retirement questions, so you don't want to miss out on this. We'll be right back.
Needing a second opinion on your retirement plan or to see if you are paying more than your fair share to Uncle Sam? Schedule your complimentary visit today. Text VISIT to 270-201-7080. That's VISIT to 270-201-7080.
Do you actually read your financial statements, or do they get tossed in a drawer and forgotten about? You could be making an expensive mistake by not taking the time to look at them. If you're paying high fees in your retirement portfolio, it could be costing you tens of thousands of dollars or more over your lifetime. Imagine the difference an extra $100,000 could make in your retirement. Statler Financial Services can help you uncover any hidden fees in your retirement accounts. Call today to schedule a time to talk about your situation. 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. When you're close to retirement, every dollar matters. Would you like to know where your money is going? Find out what kind of fees you're really paying. Statler Financial Services can help. 863-285-3815. 863-285-3815. Advisory services are offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida.
Thanks for joining us back here on the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Philip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We're diving into our Statler Financial Radio Show mailbag. Philip, this is where we get questions each and every week about all things retirement. So I'm excited to go over some of the common retirement questions. It's our favorite part of the show. Are you ready?
I'm ready to see what's in the bag today.
Okay, let's see. Our first question comes from Jane from Lake Passett. She says, I've been worried about the markets and if we'll continue to see more volatility ahead. I don't want to take any more big losses. How long should I be in cash before I try to get back into the markets?
Oh, man.
Wow.
Jane, I am sorry that you're still sitting in cash these days. That can be dangerous, and people see that all the time, right? We can't time the market. Nobody knows where the market's going to be a year from now. And obviously this year, we have a lot of stuff going on, right? And we've got elections. We're still dealing with inflation. We still have interest rate issues. So it's hard to say when is a good time to get back in the market because we don't know when the next dip is going to come or when the next bear market is going to hit and it goes back down. So I would say that really and truly in this circumstance, you need to have a well-balanced portfolio. You need to look and see what your risk number is, and then have a portfolio that's designed around that risk number. And then you just start putting some money in. Don't necessarily put it all in at one time, but put 20, 30% of it into that portfolio that matches up with your risk tolerance, and then build it from there is what I would say is a starting point.
Really good insights, Philip. I appreciate that. And Jane, thank you so much for your question. Okay, let's get to our next person. Nancy is from Sebring, and she says, I've worked at a hospital here for almost 18 years. I was planning to work a full 20 years before I retired, but now that I'm thinking about retiring early than planned, before I give my notice, how do I make sure that I'm ready to retire? Great question, Nancy.
That is a great question, Nancy, because that's good that you decided to ask the question before you pull the trigger and actually retire, right? So,
Yeah.
so Nancy, what I would do is say, look, you need to have a plan to make sure that, between Social Security and if you have a pension or if you have a 403B or 401k, that all of that, is going to be able to put together that income plan that's going to allow you to retire and enjoy it. Retiring 2 years early may not be an issue, but you don't know that unless you walk through the planning process. So if you start now and put together the plan, then you can see what that 2 years, 3 years difference might make for you. So you just need to start the plan. And that would be what I would do and recommend for you, Nancy.
Awesome.
All these questions are good questions, but it all still boils down to planning, Danielle. And again, that's why I developed the core retirement design, is to help people plan out and design that retirement they always dreamed of. Easy to do. We'll make sure that you're doing the things you need to be doing. And if not, we'll let you know and see how we may be able to help you fill in those gaps. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
There's no cost or obligation to talk with Philip and his team, so do not hesitate to call that number at 863-877-1188. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. Okay, Philip, let's move on to our next question. Let's see what's in the mailbag next. We got one from Scott from Avon Park. He says, a couple of friends I work with retiring at age 62 and claiming their Social Security benefits. I thought I had to wait until 70 to take Social Security. That's his question. He thought he had to wait until 70. Philip, what's your response there?
So nobody has to wait until 70 to take their Social Security. You get the highest amount if you wait till 70 to take your Social Security. But that may not make sense for you. It depends on a lot of factors, Scott. I mean, I look at how old are you? What's your life expectancy? What's the life expectancy of your family? Those are areas that we look at when we start planning for Social Security. So you can take it at 62. However, those folks taking it at 62, they're taking a big haircut. They're taking a big deduction because they're taking it so early. The normal retirement age for most of us out here today is going to be 67. And so at 67, you get what they call your full retirement age, and then you get the full retirement amount. If you take it before that, you get a discount. If you take it after that, they actually give you more. And so that's why when we developed our core retirement design, one of the components is the income plan. And that income planning process, we look at Social Security and look at different scenarios to determine what might work best for you when it comes to deciding when to take Social Security. And so, again, it comes to planning and understanding. And I'll tell you that the folks at Social Security, they're not going to tell you when to take it. That's on you to do that planning and that research to determine what's the best for you, Scott.
That's right, Scott. We appreciate your question. Okay, Philip, let's see who's next. We have one from Bill from Sebring. He says that we were not planning to retire for several more years, but we've had some health issues come up, and now my wife isn't healthy enough to work. So I'm thinking I should stop working to help take care of her. So can you help us evaluate if this is a wise thing to do for our situation?
Well, Bill, I'm not sure exactly how to answer this one because, you have to kind of understand long-term care and how that can really impact your finances and your financial decisions. So it really, you didn't say how old you were, so that's a little hard to determine what benefits might be available from that standpoint. So I think that in this case, it's going to depend on a lot of things, Bill. One is going to depend on how old you guys are and where you are in terms of Social Security. The other thing that's going to really make a difference is what do we have saved in our retirement accounts and in our other accounts to determine that. And then, if your wife can't work, then the issue is what is the life expectancy that we can have there, and are we going to have higher medical costs? Are we going to have long-term care issues that we have to deal with? And all these things, though complicated in some ways, can be planned for. I think we look back to the whole process that we need to have a plan in place, and everything starts from there. I mean, for us, when it comes to long-term care issues, we have a team that we have in place to help walk folks through that planning process. And that's how we help our clients manage the long-term care impacts that happen in their life. And so I hope, Bill, that answers your question. It's a little difficult without a little bit more information, but hopefully that helps you get in the right direction.
So do not hesitate to call 863-877-1188. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. Hey, thanks for tuning in into the Statler Financial Radio Show. We'll catch you next week.
Information provided during the Statler Financial Radio Show is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action. Annuity guarantees are based solely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing company. Individuals should thoroughly review the contract for specific details of the product features and costs. Income payments and withdrawals from deferred annuities are generally taxable as ordinary income in the year they are taken. All investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. No strategy is guaranteed to be successful.
This radio show is a paid placement.